Gonna try something a little bit different today. All my videos up till now have been basically designing things, and I intend to keep doing those. But thought I'd try something. Try just showing off one feature in SolidWorks, and I might do more videos like this if there's interest. But basically, I figure if you're gonna start with the most basic things, and that's the sketch. The two-dimensional sketch is probably the most basic thing in SolidWorks, and it's complicated, but everything else is based on it, so it's a good starting point, I felt. So, uh, basically, I've got my part here. This is just a new part. It's from a template, so these may be named differently for users. I think by default it's like front, left, right. I'm not in, or front, left, top. I'm not. I don't even really remember. Uh, I renamed these planes in my default part because it just is more useful for me when I'm designing 3D printing things or even machine things. So basically, there's two ways I can do the start a sketch. I can select the plane I want to sketch on and then just click that, or I can select it and up here. And this is also customized. It does not look like this out of the box. You can customize this to your heart's content just by right clicking and going customize, and then you can add or remove things. And all of these benches I've modified generally to cram more tools into the same space, but all the tools are available to you, and if you don't see one and you're not using it very often, what you can do is up here, you don't want to type in here, you want to click the little down arrow and click commands, and then you can just type in whatever you want. So if I type in line, I get line, which is exactly the same as this. So I'm in a sketch, and the sketch is going to drive other things. So if I draw a circle in here, it can make a cylinder. If I draw a circle inside of something else, it can be a hole punched through that other thing. Just about everything in SolidWorks is based on a sketch. So what do we have to work with as far as that goes? So we've got line. We've got a few versions of line. I pretty much never use these two. I just use line, and if I need a midpoint line, I'll just do a constraint to the midpoint afterwards. Center line, I really have never found a good use for that because I can just turn a line into a construction line. So I can draw a line, and I can use that to draw just about anything that's made out of just lines. So just make a triangle real simple. And let's say I drew that, and I need this line to relate to do some dimensions off of. Let's say I do a dimension here. Well, now I need this line. But let's say I don't want to actually use it for geometry to generate anything. I just want to use it for the base of that. I can click for construction, and it kind of gets all dotted and a little bit lighter. So it's still there. It's still useful for this dimension. But now it doesn't matter that it's there as far as making things that are actually going to be in 3D. Now, what can I do with this line other than that? If I click on it, I get some other options. First of all, I can click fix, and now it turns black. And when something turns black in the SolidWorks sketch, that means it is how it is. It can't be moved. I can move the endpoints up and down because they're not black, but the line itself is black, so I can't drag it left and right. It's stuck there. And in almost all cases, it's considered very bad practice to use fixed, unless it's to hold something in place while you do something else, and then you go back to it. And so, for instance, if I wanted to adjust this to be like that without dragging this left and right, I could do that, and then I'd go back and just select fixed in here and click delete, and then the fix is gone. That's the only thing that I'd recommend using fixed for, unless you're doing art, basically. Other things I can do, I can click infinite length, avoid that. It's really not useful for anything that I've found, and it just causes problems. I can adjust its angle and its length. Again, I prefer to do that outside with the Smart Dimension tool. I can click it. I can tell it to be vertical or horizontal, which are very handy. So it's vertical. Now it's since this end is constrained and it's vertical, it turns black. And then I can delete that. And since it's right now at vertical, it might actually give me an issue with horizontal. This is a basic sketch, so it won't. But if I had a whole bunch of entities all driven off that and I clicked horizontal, even if it could go horizontal, it might fail. So I'd want to maybe drag it to like right here. And that's another place where fixed comes in handy, because you can fix a point and then drag it around the point. So I could fix this, and then I could drag this line around the point, for instance, and then just go back to it and click delete the fixed relation. So let's say I just want to make this vertical. Nice and easy. How do I want these to relate? Well, I could make this horizontal. I can't make it vertical because that's already vertical and this line goes between, so it will let me do it. Well, it won't, because there's a distance between them. If there isn't a distance, if we delete that and go vertical, it will let me, but what good is that, right? So at that point, I can use the Smart Dimension tool. And what can I do with this? First of all, I can say this point, I want it to be 75 away from that line. Also, I can use that for angles. So let's say I want to control an angle between these two. I can click the first and the second and say I want them to be 75 degrees apart. Okay, so that works. And right now, we can kind of do that. What if I want these two to be the same? Well, if I select two, if I hold down Control and select two of them, I get a bunch more options. I get my horizontal and vertical as before, which either of those is going to cause an error right now because of the other relations. But if I had multiple lines that are unrelated, I could select a bunch of them, click horizontal, select a bunch of them, make them vertical. And if I've got two lines that are completely unrelated, so I can go horizontal. And I'm going to Control Z that to undo it. And I could also go collinear. So now they're just in line with each other. I can also go perpendicular, which I don't even know where that went, because they're starting off parallel, so going perpendicular probably threw one way off far away, but I can go perpendicular, and now they're perpendicular to each other. Can go parallel, and I can also make them equal, which I'm going to do down here because, again, this can be like that. If I select both of these and make them equal, well, now it's locked down. And this is equal to that. This is exactly level with the center of that. So I'm going to delete these two real quick. And that pretty much covers line. Pretty much a lot of things that you design will be mostly, if not entirely, composed of lines. But there's a couple other tools that are related to line, ignoring these ones that I never use. So then you have the rectangle tools. And by default, it's corner rectangle, which you just click a corner, and then you have 4 lines, and they come with some relations automatically. So this one's horizontal, this one's horizontal, this one's vertical, and this one's vertical. Real simple. So I can relate that to something and relate this to something, and then it turns black. So just for the moment, I'm going to pretend I related them to something by fixing them, and the whole thing turns black. Second tool is center rectangle, which can be handy because it adds a couple extra things in. See, it adds these two lines here and a center point. So if I lock down the center point, say I know exactly where the center of this rectangle should be, and I know exactly where this point should be, the rest of it gets locked down. And these are just construction lines, so they don't really have an effect on your geometry. Then we have the 3-point corner rectangle, which is basically like this, except maybe I don't want it to be perfectly flat, parallel, or horizontal here and perfectly vertical there. Maybe I want it to be at an angle. So I just click 2 points that I want, and then I can drag it out to the size I want. And in this case, my relations are a little bit different because it's saying that's perpendicular to that, that's perpendicular to that, and this is parallel to that. So now, to lock this down, I have to lock that down, and lock that down, and lock this down. Because it's otherwise, if I only lock one down, for instance, I can just, well, let's make these equal real quick so I can show it easier. If I lock the one down and then make it equal, I can kind of go around like this. Third one is basically the same thing as this. So this is a center point, and this is a regular rectangle. And this is a 3-point rectangle. So of course there's also a 3-point center rectangle where I start from the center, and I draw out and draw out. So these two are related in the same way that these two are related, basically. And then the last one is a parallelogram, which can go like this. And if I fix this and I fix this, I can make a parallelogram shape instead of just a rectangle. And here we've got parallel and parallel driving it. So on the screen, everything on the screen right now is a line. It can be a collection of lines, but all you're seeing on the screen is lines. And that's very useful for a lot of things, but many things also require curves. So I'm going to delete all but this original bit. Oh, I didn't mean to delete quite that much. Another thing is, if you want to select something, obviously you can just click it. If I want to select this whole rectangle, I can right-click it and click Select Chain. And then delete it. And I can also drag around it. And next tool is called the slot. And there's a few versions of this. So there's the straight slot, which I can do horizontal, vertical, or anywhere in between. So I click the first point I want, the second point I want, and I can just drag out to make it as big as I want. And so that's 2 lines, well, 3 lines, but one's a construction line. And it comes with the ends rounded instead of a rectangle where the ends are just lines. And then there's also a center point that you can use to constrain to as well. And this one acts kind of weird because even though it's obviously multiple pieces, it kind of gets treated as one because I click on this and the whole thing selects, I delete, the whole thing deletes. Again, just like with the center point rectangles, you got a center point slot. Basically the same as the slot. I mean, once you draw it, it's exactly the same as the slot. It even calls it a slot once it's drawn. Then you've got something a little bit trickier. This one actually doesn't have any lines. So let's see. If we click here and here, we kind of draw an arc. And then we can drag out from that arc to get a slot that matches, which is kind of handy if you're making, like, say, a fan grill for a round fan, or I'm sure you can think of many uses for something like that. And then there's an alternate version of that where basically in this one, this arc, we drew it without clicking on the center of what it is, but maybe you know this thing that you want it centered around. So then you'd want to use this one where you click right there is the center of what I want it to be centered around. I click out here. I can go this way or I can go this way. So I can make it almost all the way touching, and then once it gets right to a circle, it kind of says, oh, you want to go like that. All right. And again, you can make it as wide as you want. And again, even though it's made out of multiple pieces, you select it, and it selects the whole thing. So then we have the circle workbench, or the circle tools. And the basic circle is just click the very center, click how far out you want it to be, and done. And we can dimension that just by clicking the outside, and we say I want it to be 200 across, or 200 diameter. Alternately, we can, there are tools to work in radius, but I don't have those turned on. So, all right, you can select between diameter and radius. I never found much use for radius. I know it's the default in some programs, but I prefer diameter. So let's delete that. We've got another kind of circle. So we've got our triangle here. Say we want a circle that's exactly around it. So we can click this perimeter circle. And this just wants 3 points that are on the outside of the circle. It doesn't care what the center is. It'll figure that out on its own. So you can click these 3 points, and then that's all fully constrained right on the endpoints of these lines. Then we have arcs. And arcs are just parts of circles. In fact, if we take a circle, and I'll get to the other tools that I'm about to use in a second, but just cut a chunk of it out and get rid of these 2 lines. So this is a circle, but we click on it now, it says it's an arc because it is. It's no longer a circle. It's now an arc. And we can say merge those, and now it's a circle again. So that's how closely circles and arcs are related. You can turn them into each other just like that. But sometimes you need an arc. You don't want to draw a whole circle. Let's just start with an arc, right? So we've got a few options. First is a center point arc, which is drawn a lot like a circle. You click the center you want, and you say, I want it to be out this far. And then, just like the slot, you can say, drag it around, and I want it to be this big, or I want it to be that big. And then you've got your arc. And again, you draw that out, and you've said, you know what, never mind. I want that to be a circle. It's a circle. Second one is a tangent arc, which is actually pretty cool. It's pointless, but it's still kind of neat because you can make an arc tangent manually, but if we go like that, we can just make him tangent. It's a neat feature. Again, you can just take arcs that you already have and apply tangent constraints, but it's something I never use, but it's there. And then 3-point arc. This is the arc I use the most because when you're drawing an arc, usually this is what you want to do is you've got an endpoint that you want, and you've got an endpoint that you want, and generally you'll either want to make this tangent or you'll want to do something with it. So I'm just going to draw the 2 and just kind of make it roughly tangent with the lines. Thereabout. It's not going to be exact, but here's the thing. If I select this and hold down Control and select this, I get alternate options. So first of all, I can make a tangent. So that's a nice smooth curve from the line into the curve. And then since these are equal, it's also going to go back smooth curve in there. And if this line was horizontal instead, then I'll show you. I need to remove the equal length here. So, yeah. Then I'd have to want to do a second tangent constraint there. Just like that. Another cool thing about it is, let's say I for whatever reason, I've got this line, and I've got a circumference here. Well, part of a circumference because it's cut off. So I only have. It's not the circumference of this circle. It's just the section of the circle that we actually have here. And we could do a little bit of math on paper or in a calculator or whatever to figure out that I want this line to be the same length as this circumference. So we could do that on paper. We could do that with a calculator. Or we could just select both of them and say equal curve length. And there they are. And then when I change this, lock that down. I change this, it forces that to change. When I change this, it forces the other to change. So those are linked both ways. So, and a lot of those same tools work with the arcs inside of slots too. Next tool is another line tool, but this time we're not limited to 4. We can make it a triangle. We can make it a decagon. We can make it something that you don't even have a name for, with 748 sides exactly. Gonna make it a little bit easier than that just to fit it on the screen. We'll make an octagon. And we've got 2 options. We can do inscribed circle or circumscribed circle. I almost always do inscribed. And if I need to do circumscribed later, I can always add a circle. It's not a big deal. And all these options I pretty much ignore because I can constrain it once it's drawn. So all this is you type, all I really do over here is I type in the number of sides I want. I click the center that I want it to be, and drag it out. And you can kind of see how it's gonna look. So you can position it about where you want. And then from there, you can apply constraints. So I might say draw in a line between those, and then I want that to be horizontal. And then I can grab this circle and say 150. So now I know it's 150 millimeters from here to here. Alternatively, if we do the circumscribed circle and do the same thing basically, we can say this is 150. So now if this was mounted on a shaft and rotating, I know I need at least 150 millimeters of clearance before this is going to hit something. So another thing that it does have a circle in it, but it's all lines as far as what you're actually outputting eventually. Then we have spline, which I'm going to come back to because it's very useful, but it's complex too. Ellipse is just kind of a damaged circle, basically. So we can click the center, and we can click how far out. So it starts as a circle, and we can kind of crush it. We can make it longer, or like that. And ellipse has some funny things about it. So if we select it, there's not a whole lot of useful stuff right here. But so right now it's at an angle. We don't want it to be an angle. We want it to be straight. So we can select these 2 points and say they're horizontal. We can also dimension between the points. Say I want it to be 100 high and 200 wide. And then I'll just dimension that. And then we've got that locked down. And if I want to spin it, I can just remove the horizontal and spin it like that. And let's see what else we have. We have a partial ellipse that's the same as that is to the ellipse what the arc is to a circle. It's just an ellipse with a chunk cut out. We also have parabola and conic. I don't think I've ever used one of those. If I need something like that, I'm generally in the realm where I need a spline. But those are there for you if you have a use for them somehow. Then we have the sketch fillet, which is kind of weird because it's not creating something exactly. It's more destroying something, but also I guess it is creating a little bit. So I select that. I select the radius that I want this to be, and then I click between 2 lines. And then I click OK. And it doesn't close right away. You have to click OK twice. So now it filled at that, and it comes with a little dimension built right in, so I can change it however I need it to be. I'm going to do Control Z until that's gone, because we also have, if we expand that, we also have the chamfer. And we can go from here to here. Oh, what am I? Better if you start with nothing selected on that, I guess. So we can just go like that. We can do equal distance. We can go different distance. And oh, I already did it. So yeah, you want to change your distances before you click it, but you get the idea there. It's just a chamfer, and that's handy if you're drawing a rectangle. And you go, oh, I want a chamfer right there, and there you go. It's there. Then we have plane, which is really only in 3D sketches. So I'll come back to that maybe in another video. We have text, which is a more complex thing. I'll get back to that. We have point. Point can be handy. Point won't actually create anything in your physical model, in your 3D, but it can be handy to say, I want. All right, if I hover over this long enough, I can grab that center point, and that's the same as the point I made down here. The difference is that I can click that. That's the main difference. So now I can go coincident. And if the rectangle had been locked down, then this would have moved to it. So let's try just fixing those. Let's say now if I do coincident, it goes like that. And there are other uses for a point. Sometimes you find unexpected uses for points because it's just one point. You could do it with the end of a line, but why bother when you can do it with just a point? Path, I also really never use. At one point, I thought it'd be useful for designing camshafts. It wasn't, and I've never found a good use for it. I still have it, but never found a good use for it. Pretty much same with belt and chain. I've always found that if I need something that this could do, Spline does a better job. And then we have split entities, which is just, I've got this line. I don't want it to be a line. I want it to be 2 lines, or 3 lines, or 4 lines. And now it's split up into separate sections. So that's one line, that's another line. And a lot of times they keep their relations. So this has a collinear relation with that and with that because it was made from that. If I delete those, then I can do that because now they're separate lines. And I can do the same thing with arcs or with ellipses, with whatever. So I skipped over Spline, and Spline is a cool thing. So let's say, let me move over here. I'm going to draw an octagon and a line, and make it a triangle. And I'm just going to select these and select this chain and fix it. Select this chain and fix it. All right, so what does Spline do? Spline is kind of weird because I can click from here to here, and it looks like I just have a straight line. But now if I select that, and I say I want those to be tangent, and select this and this, say I want those to be tangent, it makes this thing that it could be made out of arcs, but it'd be a real pain to do. And let's say I've got a circle and a smaller circle, And I've got maybe some points along them. This is just a very quick thing. This would be the end result of a lot of design. You can select all these points and kind of make something that goes around, and you select it, and now you've got kind of a nice path around there, and you can lock these down. You can say I want this to be tangent, and it kind of figures it out. Sometimes not perfectly because this isn't fully locked down. Yeah, and you can make weird shapes. The goal is not to make weird shapes. The goal is to make things like cams and such, but kind of get the idea with that. You can have you can have a single segment, you can have hundreds of segments. You can make them tangent, you can make them perpendicular. Again, I'll go into here and select two things, so I can even make them equal curvature, which is really cool because, all right, so for whatever reason we figured out that's what we want. I don't know what it is, but that's what we want. And I want to figure out, maybe that's made out of rubber band. I want to figure out how long of rubber band I need. So I can select these two and say equal curve length. And now I can dimension that and say, okay, that rubber band's got to be 2180 long. And if we select them both, we can undo that. So then the last thing, at least in this section, is text. And text, you generally want a line to attach it to. You can also attach it to an arc or a circle, but ideally an arc. And you can just type in, and you don't see anything, right? Because we are very big. But if we zoom way in, we see this is my text. And we can flip it around to the other side and make it go backwards. We can center it along this line, so it's right in there, or drop it to the other side. Or this is probably a bad idea with such small text, but we can make it the full justify, which will split them up quite a bit for a line like this, but for a shorter line where you're closer, that can be useful. We can, it gives us access to bold and italic right there, but we can do a lot more as well. So if we uncheck this, use document font. First of all, we can make our letters wider, and we can increase the space between them if we want. But we can also go click this font and say, I want this to be, Charlemagne Standard. I want it to be bold oblique. I want it to be 20 millimeters tall. And this space thing is kind of a little bit busted. I just select 0, and if I need more than one line, I'll draw in a second, or more than one line of text, I'll draw in a second line and put the text on the second line. And we can even strike out or underline it. So it's a lot like, in any word processor, you can adjust the font how you want it. And then when it's more close to the right size, we can use the full justify, and it works a little bit better. We can even go backwards, so like we're reading it in a mirror. So that's the text tool. And let's see. That's basically I grouped, this is all custom obviously. I grouped these together because this is like creating things new. So what's the next section is kind of modifying things. So I've got this line, and I want another one that's basically just like it, and parallel to it, but just offset. So that's what offset's for, is I can offset it by 10 or 100, whatever. Or maybe I've got this whole triangle. So let me select this whole triangle. I want to offset the whole triangle by 100 or by 10. Or maybe I want to go inwards instead. I can click reverse. Or maybe I want it to be inwards and outwards. I can click bidirectional. And I can even say that that original triangle, it's useful for basing this new one on, but I don't want to keep that around for actual using. I just want to keep it around to base this triangle on. Or maybe this offset one, I'm not actually going to use it directly. I just want to use it to draw things off of. So now that's just construction lines, and I can draw off of them. Offset on surface is a 3D sketch thing. If I get to 3D sketches in a future video, I'll cover that, or I'll try to remember to. Convert entities is something that I can't quite show. Well, I can. I'm going to make a new sketch. So I've got that existing sketch. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff I don't need in there. All I need from that is this spline. And I don't want to draw it in again. That was a lot of work, right? Convert entities. Now I've got it in the sketch. Simple as that. And let's see. Intersection curve is a little bit different. Let's say first I need to make just a bit of geometry and make this 100 and midplane. Okay, so let me go back and make a new sketch here. And okay, so I've got this very important thing that I designed at some previous stage, and I just want to a line that's right on here. What I can do is click intersections curve, and I just get a line right on there. Or if I select the body, I click intersection curve. Oh, it's not going to want it now. Select the body, should be able to click intersection curve, and everywhere that that body goes to the plane that I'm on, it's going to draw lines or arcs or whatever the case may be. Base curves, again, 3D sketch. Hopefully get to that at some point. Segment is kind of neat because say I've got this line, I want to split it into 5 equal lines. So I can either just put points along it that are equally spaced, or I can actually split it up. And now I've got separate lines that are equal in length. They're same overall effect as the original line, but they're separate lines, which can be useful. So that covers that section. Then I've kind of got the patterns start. So linear lets me just go in one direction. So say I want this one particular line to be offset 100, but I don't want it to be offset just once. I want it to be offset 50 times. And in addition to that, I also want it to be offset downwards 10 times. And I want, say, 1,000. Or maybe 300? Maybe? Is there... I'm working with some pretty big lines, I guess. 500. Okay. And I can change the angle if I want. Or I can even put dimensions in there. An alternate way I can do that is, let's see. Go back to here and just draw in that real quick. So I'm in this sketch and I've got this piece. I wanted to pattern it this direction. Instead of just letting it select the x-axis, I can click here and then click there. And then when I do my pattern, it patterns along that direction to match. And I can do that in 2 directions as well. But right now, if I did it along the x, it had more along this way. It just goes straight, but I can also say that away. And I can also flip these, or like that as well. So that's linear pattern. The next one is called a circular pattern. So if I've got a circle and I've got something that I designed inside the circle, and I want a bunch of those all around the circle. I can click circular pattern, click the center point of the circle, and maybe I want 10 of those. And it'll do, I've got it set to equal spacing, which is normally what you want. But maybe you want 10 of them in half of it. So let's say across 180 degrees, which would be half, divided by 10. So now I've got 10 in just half of it. And let's see, I'm going to Control Z out of that. Another thing I've got to show you on that, though, is I'm going to fix this circle like again, you wouldn't want to actually fix this. It's just an example. So this, pretend it's dimensioned somehow. So again, we're going to select the center point and going to make 10 of these and click OK. And if I fix this original one, well, these are still not fixed. And sometimes they will if you do things in just a particular way, but normally this pattern won't be locked down. So all you have to do is drag it out, select the center of the pattern, and make a concentric, or else you can select a point, the point that you originally clicked on, make it coincident, then it's locked down. So next one is mirror. So let's say I've got this, and this, and I've got a line, and I want it to be an exact copy but backwards. So just to make it a little more obvious, I'll draw that in as well. So I'm just going to select all these. I'm going to say mirror, and then I'm going to click here. And once in a while when you do this, you'll have a single line in there. And you click mirror. And it'll go, oh, there's only one line. That's the line you want to mirror. So if you only have one line in there, or if you have only one construction line in there that you selected, it's automatically going to assume that that one line or that one construction line is what you want to mirror around. And in which case, what you have to do is select everything but the line, or select nothing at all. Start with nothing selected, then select what you want, and then select, well, let me get these out of the way. So you start it, you select just the things you want, and then you select where you want to mirror. Dynamic mirror, I never use it. It just causes too much problems. I generally would recommend not to use it. Use mirror. Trim entities is, I actually showed that before. So basically, all right, so I've got these two that are intersecting. I want to extrude this and this, the entirety. So what I can do is I can click trim, and I can trim here and here. And there's lots of options for how to trim. The only good trim that I found that works really well for me is trim to closest. Basically, I just leave this trim to closest. I never mess with anything else. I just leave it like that. And I can just trim however I feel I want to trim. Just click on the thing that I don't want to be there. And even if I'm in here and I go, you know what, I don't want this at all. Just trim it out of existence entirely. Last is extend. Frankly, you can do this better with other tools. I wouldn't even worry about it. Then we have move entities. Again, you can probably do this better with other tools, but say I want to move all this, and it hasn't been constrained yet. I can select it, and let's say I want to go from here to there. That's all it does, which, all right, it can be handy, I guess, in some cases, but generally, if you're doing that, it's completely unconstrained, and you shouldn't be working unconstrained to begin with. Rotate entities, kind of the same thing. We can select these parts, and I want to rotate them around this, and by, say, 75 degrees. and for whatever reason it gave me an error there, but it's okay. I'm not actually designing anything. Copy, pretty obvious, really. Just select what you want, copy, and from here I want to copy it to there. Pretty simple. Then we've got scale, which can be useful for more artistic things, not so much for design usually, but I want those to be twice as big, and it needs to know where to make them twice as big from, because it'll start, if I click here, it'll expand out this way. If I click here, it'll expand out this way. If I click here as the base and I doubled size, it's going to be way, way over there because it's going to expand all the space in between. So say I click here and I want it to be twice as big, it moves it way over there. Whereas if I click here, or you get the idea. And you can also even do multiples. And sometimes it doesn't want to. There we go. Just keep expanding outward. Last thing is sketch picture. And this is basically just, I want to drop a picture in the sketch. I've got two uses that I found for this. The first is if you've got something that maybe it's a really weird shape that you're trying to model something that actually exists. Maybe you bought it in a store and you want to make a mount for it or something like that. You can't find anything as far as a 3D model for it, so you got to design it yourself. And it's such a weird shape that you don't even know where to start with the calipers. You might take a picture of it or even put it on a flatbed scanner, get an image that way, and drop this into Sketch and then kind of just trace the picture. The other thing that you can do with Sketch Picture is sometimes you want to put a decal on something. And SolidWorks does have a decal feature, but it's temperamental and it doesn't work for all circumstances. So you can actually just use a sketch to hold a sketch picture, and kind of make a decal. It's not really a great design thing, but if you're just trying to make your final design look nice, or do kind of a render type deal, it can be useful. But there are options in there, but I'm not even gonna bother with it. Let's see. Well, these are huge. Yeah, so I'm not gonna bother with trying to find a picture right now. It's pretty self-explanatory. It basically it comes up with how big do you want this picture to be, and you type in how big you want it to be. You can constrain it, and it's basically like sizing it in Photoshop or something. Next section. So display delete relations tells me all the relations in here, and I can like go through them, and it'll highlight them as I click on them. Say that's coordinal, or there's a coincident constraint there, something like that. I can select multiple different kinds of things. So for instance, if I'm having an error, right now I'm not, but let's say draw like this, and I'll fix these, and then I'll tell it I want this to be horizontal, which it can't be because the endpoints are fixed. Now if I display delete relations, it automatically select over for defining and say I can't make this horizontal, so I can just delete that, and then the sketch is fine. External also, back down here, these lines were generated with the intersection tool, so the relation is an external intersection relation. We can say I want everything that's locked, which I don't think I have anything in this particular sketch, but you can also click selected entities and then just click, I want to know everything that's related to this. And it tells me it's symmetric with that. Pretty basics. but it's a very, very useful tool for when everything turns red and orange, or red and yellow, which red is like, oh my god, I can't fix this, and yellow is, oh my god, I can't fix this, but it's not quite as bad. You don't want red or yellow in your sketch, and when you see them, this is usually the first place to check. Repair sketch, I don't usually use, but sometimes it can be handy for spotting like tiny little problems that you can't quite see, because we can say there's a 2 points gap there, or oh, there's a lot of 2 points gaps in this sketch because I haven't really been trying. And you can control this. Sometimes this will start off with a really low number here. It'll say like 0.00001, and it won't find any problems. And if you just change it to 1, all of a sudden it finds all sorts of problems. So that's another thing to look at if you're using Repair Sketch. Make sure it's at least in a reasonable range compared to your sketch. Quick snaps, I don't really use. If I want to use one of these, I'll just do a manual constraint, but they're there for you. Kind of the same deal over here with automatic relations. I have most of my automatic relations turned off, which I recommend turning off most of your automatic relations because they just cause more problems than they're worth. But like right now, I think I have 2 turned on, so I have this on. But if I'm thinking I don't want those I don't even want those, I can turn it off just by clicking this and then do what I want to do and then turn it on real quick. Fully defined sketch, don't use it unless it's something like artistic. If you're drawing like a smiley face, maybe. But even then, you probably want to constrain it yourself, because fully defined sketch is just going to constrain it where it's sitting, and it's probably going to constrain it in a really strange way. Add relation is kind of pointless because you can just select 2 things while holding control, and then you can add your relation there. But there is a button for it if you want. You can do that, and it's the exact same thing. Let's see. Then we have, I avoid this. I never use this. This can be useful, like, because I know this is fully sealed up. I know this is fully sealed up, and then this is sealed up even within that. It can be handy to have. For instance, there's something wrong with this triangle. I can't see what's wrong with this triangle offhand. Oh, there doesn't actually seem to be anything wrong with the triangle, but it thinks there is. Okay. Yeah, this triangle it thinks is fine, but if I draw not quite a triangle, well, now it's not highlighted, so I know there's something wrong, and I assume there's something wrong with this one, but it might actually be perfectly fine. Oh, you know what? I have an extra line, don't I? I don't know. There's something wrong with that triangle. It's gone now. I can draw in a new one so that it's not having something wrong with it. But basically, I just turn that on for diagnostics, and I turn it off because it can make things hard to watch. But some people like it to be on all the time, and it's up to you. Split line, I don't really use. It's not really a sketch thing anyway, but line, so I kind of threw it in here. Actually, all this stuff is kind of not really sketch stuff, except for this. This is really more of a 3D sketch thing. But it does have one thing in it that's not a 3D sketch thing, so I'll show you that. So I draw a circle, and this is a new sketch. I click this, and I can make, if I rotate, I can make a helix, let's say 5 tall, kind of like a spring type deal, which is more of a 3D sketch thing, which I'd get to in another one. But another thing is, in addition to that, we can also just make a spiral, which is a 2D sketch thing. So this tool kind of is both. So we can make a spiral in either direction. We can start it at different spots. We can make it more revolutions. We can pitch as the distance between here and here, so we can shrink that down quite a bit if we want to. And it's all based on that circle I drew. And we can even go inwards if we want. Make it look kind of like an old record or something. So that's an option. And actually doing that takes you out of the sketch because this helix is a new thing. It'll contain the sketch that you based it on, but the helix is like its own feature all on its own. So maybe not exactly a sketch thing, but sort of related. Then we have the blocks. And what are handy, blocks are tricky to describe. Basically, it's just a collection. So I've got these two things. I want to use them again. These two things, I want to use them again. So I can click Make Block. And that is my block. I can even pick an insertion point, but I don't want to. And okay. So then once I have that block, I'm in a new sketch later on. Oh, new sketch. I say, I want that again. I want to use that again. But I don't want to convert it because then it's going to be in the same spot. So I'm just going to insert that block. And I can add a whole bunch of them. As many as I want. And I can rotate them in here. But you don't really have to because if you fix that, it'll rotate around. So it's, even though this might be fully constrained and locked in place when you make the block out of it, once you paste the block, it's just that exact shape and it can rotate any way you want it to be. But okay, so I've got my block here. I want to do something more with it. I don't want it to be a block anymore because that's kind of limiting. It's like one single piece. So I can edit the block, which generally I avoid doing because I can just go make a new block of however I wanted it to be, or I can explode the block, and now it's divided out. And I can even save a sketch as a block to an external file, and then I can open that up into a whole different part. And dissolve entities, so it works on block, or it doesn't really work on blocks. It's more for other things like I believe it works on these. Yeah, actually, I never used dissolve entities. I thought that's what it was for. It's so useful that I've been using SolidWorks for over 10 years, and I don't know what it's for. Put it that way. There's a bunch of things that relate to Spline in here, which I hardly ever use. I just don't really have much use for them in general because I don't use splines that much. But you can control things, really dial in your spline if it's not constrained the way you want it to be. But if you get into splines heavy enough to need any of these, you'll figure them out real quick. We can also do layers, and colors. So I want this to be red. Oh, that won't go red because that's a block. But I believe it will let me change that to red. Or, ooh, I really want to annoy someone that's going to try to fix this later. Because now that's black, and they look at that and go, it's fine. That's fully constrained. Oh, wait, it's not. And then they look at who created the sketch and come at me with an axe or something. But so that pretty much covers the sketch tool bench. And like I said, everything that is in here, obviously your SolidWorks is a 3D program, And the goal is to make 3D things, even if it's something I'm making for a laser cutter that's going to be all flat pieces. It's, flat pieces that assemble together to make something 3D. And so the sketch, at first glance, maybe it doesn't seem like it fits in, but basically you sketch something and then you use one of these other tools to make it 3D, make something 3D out of it. So just pull straight out of it, make it big, and we've got something like that. And we can do another sketch on there. Just make a circle and go through it. So yeah, that's just two sketches, or two very simple sketches at that. And all these tools, or most of these tools at least, are based on at least one sketch. So yeah, that pretty much covers the sketch section. And let me know in the comments if there's any interest in continuing this, because I've got a whole tray of features here for solids. I've got a whole tray of features for surfaces, which gets real interesting. I've got the 3D sketch, which is a really neat tool that it really sets SolidWorks apart from a lot of other programs like Creo. But it has a way of twisting your mind and making you confused. Still makes me confused after all these years to look at it sometimes. I got the sheet metal bench. I don't work with that much because I don't have a sheet metal brake, but I have used it a few times to build stuff or design stuff for customers. Got the evaluate bench, which doesn't actually create anything, but it does help you avoid creating garbage in the physical world. And I got a lot of add-ins that I probably won't cover even if people ask me to, because generally I don't have to use them. So I'm not as knowledgeable in those as a lot of people are. And MBT, this is not creating anything physical. This is more for it's kind of like a drawing except in 3D, basically. So you can attach things here to say this is related to this in this way, and this needs to be flat to within this amount, or this needs to have this finish on it, or this polish level, or it needs to be this smooth. It's a cool thing to have if you're in manufacturing or a big corporation and you're sending your drawings out or sending models out, because you don't have to send out the drawings in theory. Well, most companies do that anyway, but in theory you could just put all this stuff right into your model and say, look at the model, it has everything you need in it, and then they could just make it to your specifications without having a drawing involved, because a lot of times there's a disconnect between the drawing and the model, even though there's a link between them. Maybe the person doing the drawing doesn't know that this surface needs to be really smooth and this surface needs to be rough, and that these need to be exactly 90 degrees apart, but these can be as far apart as you want, or etc. So yeah, again, done with the sketch tools. If you're interested in any other sections, I can do more of these. Thanks again for watching. If you want to hear more about these, comment please. Otherwise, I won't bother doing it anymore. And otherwise, have a great day.